Hi, it's Jen from Shabby Fabrics, back with a teal block. I absolutely love this block. Everyone here at Shabby Fabrics says of all the blocks in the quilts, they love the under-over block. It's so fun because it looks like everything is weaving in and out, and it looks far more complex than it actually is. So there's a lot of pieces to this, and we strongly recommend that you go ahead and label your fabric as you go. We've done that here. Let me just point out some of the features of this particular block, which will help you organize your stacks accordingly and label accordingly. First off, some of the really neat things about this, that's very simple, is you're always going to press to the dark. So that takes the mystery out of pressing on this particular block. Press to the dark every time and you will be correct. Because the corners, you can see these come here 45 degrees and make a 90 degree in the corner. There's templates like we did in the last block here, but for the most part, we're just having you cut a strip, iron the template down, then simply take that to our spinning mat and we will just trim that away. So you're really, while you are ironing a template down, this is just a strip that's being cut. And you're ironing this down, and it's really just this part and this part. So it's a lot easier to go ahead and just cut your strips. I think these were 1 5/8 inches. Again, measurements are in the download, so don't take that as gospel. That could be the measurement, or not. But go ahead and get those measurements in the download. As we take this away, you can see that's coming into the corner. That's why you do have a few templates for the corner. And then for the pieces that are along here, we will cut our strips and then cut them on the various angles to accommodate where they need to go within the block itself. The block is actually assembled. I want to show you this ahead of time. This is going to help alleviate a little bit of your potential anxiety with this block. It's assembled in quadrants. Let me show you what I mean by that. The under-over block has 4 quadrants. Here's the first quadrant, second, third, and fourth. And then a center square will join all of those together. More on that later. I want to get back to these strips that we went ahead and cut. You cut these strips. How do you cut these angles? How do we get to this place? I'm making C with you right now. I want to make sure you can see that with the overhead camera. So this started with this, all right? So now we'll take this with our ruler. On this ruler, you have the 45-degree lines. We know, let me bring this here so you can kind of see the goal. We're trying to cut that on a very predictable angle. And that line is going to help me do it. It's like, how do we get into that? How do we find that place? So you're going to rotate your ruler until you find, see how that line scoots right along my fabric, right along the top of my fabric. And you don't have to line this up. If you want to line this up with your mat, that's fine. But we're going to run that black line so it is exactly on top of our rectangle, and I want to make sure that I'm starting in the very corner of that fabric, right in that sweet spot. Let me get my head out of the way so the overhead camera can see that. This black line is running right on top of the rectangle, and the ruler is right on that corner. I'm going to go ahead and make that cut. That's what's in our stack, right? And I've already cut all those out ahead of time. So I just wanted to demonstrate how to do that. Same story. With this strip, unlike the other one, in fact, let me point this out. See how this strip is here and that strip is, the angle is in a different direction? That means that the angle is not over here. We're going to go get the angle on this side. So this time, let's turn that. I have to always reorient myself. Now, for the last cut, that was a very simple right-handed cut. It's very easy for a right-handed person. How does a right-handed person make this cut? I know how I was tempted to do it before, like this. That is bad. That's really bad. This is why I love to use the spinning mat. I'm going to hold that in place and rotate this. So now this is natural for me, and I'm not risking going underneath myself and cutting myself. So now that's how you prepare these strips. All right, you get the idea. There's a lot of pieces in this. The assembly is actually fairly straightforward for the most part. And then we'll get to the final assembly. One thing I want to point out to you that is really, really important, and I should have pointed this out to you before, is when you get ready to cut these angles, it is essential that every fabric is right side up. You know how when we cut fabric that's folded in half, you have one fabric that's right side up and one fabric that's wrong side up. Before you cut these angles, all fabrics must be right side up, otherwise the orientation will be wrong. So definitely wanted to mention that. Now let's get back to this block assembly. Now what am I going to do with all these pieces? When we break things down, and I'm going to start actually with this one because this is the simplest to just see. I'm simply sewing this to this to this, pressing to the blue, and then I'm sewing that side on it, pressing to the blue, and that's my quadrant 3. Similarly, here, together, these go together, pressing to the blue, this goes together, that's quadrant 2. Over here, we're pressing these. This is a unit. This, and this is a unit. These go in between the two, and this is on the end. Every time pressing toward the blue. That's my quadrant 4. Quadrant 3, here, here, and here. We'll go ahead and sew this to that. These go together. And they also get sewn to this. These come together, get sewn to this. Those go together, and then this. Don't worry, there will be a very detailed download explaining the orientation of that. But I think you can, if you kind of stop for just a second, it's easier to see on the smaller quadrants. As they build, it's a little bit harder to see it. But it has to go together in a certain orientation to make this possible. Now, even once you have all of this together, how on earth do you join all of these things together? How is that going to be possible? One square will join everything up. I'm going to move everything off the table, and we're going to do some sewing. And I'm going to show you how this will come together, and this is called a partial seam. Now, I'm going to be completely honest with you. I've done a partial seam maybe a whole 2 times in my whole sewing career. This is just not something I do a whole bunch of because I'm a quilter, and partial seams are not part of quilting typically. It is part of the under over block, and I think because of the beauty of the block, it's so worth learning how to do it. Now you'll start with quadrant 4, and we are going to sew. So let me put that back so you're seeing it. Now before I even start doing it, notice how this, you're always going to know if you're on target if this visual ribbon or stripe lines up. See how they line up right now? As we go, we'll be checking that. So in order for me to sew the other sections together, we are going to go right sides together with this. And I'm going to sew from about, I'm going to leave a good healthy 1/2 inch to 5/8 and sew down here. This is going to go together. Quadrant 4 will go to 1, we'll go to 2, and we'll go to 3. Therefore, the part that needs to be left open, the partial seam, is down here next to quadrant 3. So from about here on up is where we're going to sew, and this is going to stay open for now. So I'm just going to turn that around, take this to the sewing machine, and I do encourage you to mark this so you don't get confused because it's very confusing. for this project. Now it's just assembly. Pressing toward the blue. See how I naturally, let me point this out. My instinct was to press toward the white. There's less resistance, but remember how I said press to the dark every time in this vlog. So while that feels a little awkward right now, you'll see later why that's important. Everything is pressed to the dark. Okay, so I'm gonna put that back. We said that the next section was sewing 1 to 4. So I'm going to bring that right sides together. And I'm going to start adding some pins here. First thing I want to check is when I lay this open, does my ribbon continue or is it off? If it's off, something went wrong. You need to go back and stop. Right now that looks like it's in a good position. It looks like it's lining up very well. Okay. Let's go sew our quadrant seam allowance carefully. All right. Let's take a peek here. Did we line up well? Yep, it looks like the ribbon just continues. And where are we going to press? Definitely to the dark. We already said that multiple times. Let me get the spinning mat out of the way. We don't need that. Pressing toward the dark again. All right. Now, 2 right sides together, and I can see when I'm lined up here, this is just going to be beautiful. It's fantastic. But still, because this is so precise, I'm going to add some pins. I don't want anything shifting. I love this magnetic pin cushion. If I take out too many pins, it just goes and picks them up for me, which I really love that. All right. Now, as I'm sewing, I'm going to try to make sure those seams don't flip up like that on me, to keep everything lying nice and flat. Now we know what to do. That partial seam is coming up. The thing I'm discovering as I grow as a quilter and learn new things, which I'm constantly learning, especially at quilt retreats. I'm amazed what I can learn at quilt retreats because there's so many levels of quilters there, from literally masters that I learned so much from. There's always more to learn, and I've avoided things like set-in seams and Y seams and partial seams. And you know, I figured out, well, why did I avoid that? This is easy. Just follow a process and it works out beautifully. Just be careful on what you're doing, careful cutting. pressing and sewing, and the results will be beautiful. All right, we're down to our final quadrant. We can obviously take the stickers off here. We know where we are now, no doubt about that. And here comes our final seam. Just going to lay this back. Here we go. Once again, we'll pin. Sizing again, I can't emphasize that enough. Adding sizing to fabrics just gives them more body, less stretch. Stretch is not a quilter's friend, unless you want that for bias binding. We're going to press to the dark, just like we've been doing. I'll check that from the front too. Make sure I didn't take a tuck. Okay, so now we're at this stage. If I can press that a little bit better. So now, you can press that seam open, or actually to the blue even more. That's it. That's all you need to do is pick up where you left off. That seam, close it. Let me show that to you. So I stopped right there before. That's where I'm going to start. Okay. Press that out really well. Wow, how fun! How fun was that? This is, I could do a whole quilt with that. So there's the block. It's absolutely beautiful. I would love to see a whole quilt made out of this. So I'll be back for the blue block.